Hello everybody, and hello to all our poets as they join us. We are now live on YouTube and we're here tonight for the wonderful launch of Dressing for the Afterlife by Maria Taylor. I'm Jane Kamain from Nine Arches Press, and I am absolutely thrilled this evening to be here with Maria Taylor herself, Kostya Selakis and Mona Arshi, who are our special guest poets for this evening's event. A huge thank you to them for joining us, and a huge thank you to everybody out there on YouTube who's watching us this evening. We're very excited to be here and very excited to be broadcasting live to you from our living rooms, from our various spaces at home in this new strange world where we are presenting our new poetry books to online audiences via these lovely launches. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce this evening and just say Maria's new book, Dressing for the Afterlife, is published today. We've also got some wonderful news that Maria's book is also contains a poem that has been highly commended in the Forward Prizes, which we're also absolutely delighted about, in the Forward Book of Poetry. And we will be celebrating this 8 years on from Maria's debut, Melancholy, which Nine Arches published in 2012. So it's an extra special evening. And we were planning to be in London, in Coventry, doing various things around the book live, but obviously with everything that's happening in the world at the moment, we're just very glad to be here online with you, our audience, presenting a wonderful evening of poetry. And we've got a real treat for you this evening. We will have readings. We'll also take a Q&A at the end as well. So please use the live chat on YouTube a little bit later on this evening if you want to ask questions for the poets, and we'll have readings from each of them as well. So welcome. Pull up a chair. Pour yourself a cocktail, prepare for the glamorous and wonderful world of dressing for the afterlife, and prepare for a wonderful evening of poetry. Hello audience, join us. I'll introduce our first poet for this evening. Kostya Selakis will be our first guest. To tell you a little bit about Kostya, he is a London-based poet and journalist, born and raised in Athens, Greece. His debut pamphlet will be published by Ignition Press and is called Ephebos, and it will be published in November 2020. In 2019, he won the Oxford Brookes International Poetry Competition, ESL category, and his poems have appeared in Magma, Perverse, Strix, Brittle Star, and Was a Fairy, amongst others. He founded and co-edits Harana Poetry, the online magazine for poets writing in English as a second or parallel language, and is deputy poetry editor at Ambit. You can also follow Kostya on Twitter at Kostyanaut. I urge you all to do that. Kostya, welcome. Please join us. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's great to be part of this. Congratulations, Maria, on your book birthday, Sinhaliteria. Funnily enough, it's about 6 months to the day, plus a day, I think, since my last poetry event that I went to. It was Jennifer Wong's launch on the 9th of March, and that's when I saw you, Jane, last time, so exactly 6 months ago. And also almost exactly a year since I saw Mona in Norwich. So it's quite sort of interesting how these dates have kind of worked fit with each other. So I've got a few poems to read. I've got a little bit of a Greek theme, a little bit of Cavafy in here as well, which I know Maria really appreciates. So I'm going to read a few poems from my pamphlet, Ephebos, which is coming out in November. And I'll start with a poem that takes us back to Athens. Bathroom in an Athens suburb, 1994. All I have are catalogues from archaeological museums, page after page of glossy athletes, gods and heroes in bronze or marble, some missing limbs, noses, heads, others full-bodied. At first, I'm happy to look, flick through their fractured perfections. Soon, growing bolder, I will them off their pedestals, let them stretch after millennia of holding celebrated poses, grant them hearts a pulse, sinew and permeable skin. Grateful they let me touch them. Trembling, I examine the scars dug by the ploughs of farmers and fishermen's anchors. I close my eyes, smell the earth that clings to the tangled hair of those found in muddy fields, the hint of iodine in the sweat of those raised from ancient shipwrecks. Ignore the ochre scent of my mother's cosmetics on the wicker shelf. No one will knock and ask what I'm doing locked behind this door. I don't want to come out, though as summer nears, it gets harder and harder to breathe. Then I've been in the UK for about 21 years. So the poem I'm going to read now is at the cusp of me moving from Greece to the UK, to England, to Warwickshire, in fact, with Warwickshire being in the horizon. Totality. Solar eclipse, Crete, 11th of August, 1999. The car's an incubator, even with the windows down. Squashed in the back of the boxy rental, I'm taller than both my parents. Radio says today we'll hit 40 degrees. We're too far south to wow at the diamond ring for the sky to dim. Pacing the water's edge in the brooding heat, the clammy nylon of my swim shorts clings. I kick and kick the breathless sea. Next month, I can learn to drive, buy alcohol, gamble. Next month, I'll find my core release in the shadows of England's parks. Next month. Maria and I have talked a lot about us being bad Greeks and bad Cypriots and how we don't really sort of necessarily, not necessarily fit, but, you know, when we're called to perform our Greekness or Cypriotness, we kind of fail miserably sometimes. But I write a lot about the straitjacket of Greekness, what is expected of you. And unfortunately, very often not fitting in a certain sort of cultural mold leads to tragedy, especially in macho societies. So I've got a poem that is inspired by Cavafy's elegies to young Alexandrians, but it's taken to a recent tragedy in Greece. The case of Vangelis Yakumakis, after Cavafy. In this muddy ditch, overlooked by naked branches, lies the decomposing body of Vangelis, a Cretan. He studied at the Dairy Academy nearby. Missing for 37 days, he was cited all over Greece at once. The press described him as sensitive, a loner. Bullies slapped him while he ate. When he showered, they turned the water off. Someone kicked him down a flight of stairs. Someone locked him in a closet, made him sing for hours. Then the video, 6 sniggering guys piling on top of him. Thousands heard Vangelis beg, "Please stop, you're hurting me." His voice smaller than an olive. All this was recorded. So was the knife found at his side. What's lost are his features, the smooth flesh on his cheek, where his mother would kiss him goodbye. I spoke earlier about how I came to England in 1999. Reason why I write in English, and I've discussed this before in some other chats, is because Greek is the language of the closet for me. English is the language of my free vocabulary, if you want, my gay vocab as well, if you want. But still, it took me quite a long time to muster the courage to come out to my parents. And I did that when I was 30, so about 9 years ago. And this poem, I'm reading it in part also because it's my poetry mentor's favorite. So I really want to read this. And she told me I can't get a book out without it, without this poem in it. But also it's a moment that was very important for me. Sparrow. The day before the royal wedding, rainbow flags jostle for air with Union Jack bunting. Hurrying up Compton Street, I phoned my father. From neon posters, near naked boys invited me to all weekend-long parties at the clubs. Every stranger I passed looked happier than me. I cried so much the night before, said perhaps I can send my yaya. 2 floors down from their flat, she could tell them over breakfast. I could picture her doing it. Pink dress gown over her nightdress, light-footed in her fluffy slippers. The angel with a message. If it came out of her mouth like a velvet ribbon, surely they couldn't turn their faces from it. My mother looking at her scrambled eggs as if they were vomit. I said to Dad, we could no longer live like this. And in my ear, Dad said, it's all right, in the careful voice I'd heard him use when talking to sparrows. Those curious little things, so easy to frighten, that would perch, hollow-boned, on the railing as he tended his delicate balcony plants. Finally, I'm going to read something that is not in the pamphlet, but it was published recently in an amazing new queer publication, 14 poems, which I really admire, and it's got beautiful poems in it. And I was very, very honored to have a poem included in this beautiful issue. Kind of gives an idea of what I'm working on now, which is a little bit more about the wider concept of Greekness and how I fit in it, or queer people fit in it, and about inheritance within that. It's called Vine. Vine. Gift from my forefather, green calligrapher, tell me, do your roots absorb every voice cast in this yard? Endless Easter feasts, arguments, the breaking of terrible deaths. Each leaf you bear, a word from an ancestor. I pick them, fill them with rice, mint, dill. My mouth tastes sweetness. In tile searing heat, I sit in your cool. Watch the black and white cat cling to your frame, twisting bark like I cling to our name. I, your very last leaf, closest to the blank sun. Thank you very much. And Maria, again, congratulations. Can't really wait to read Dressing for the Afterlife.
Thank you so much, Kostya. What a beautiful reading. And I'm really excited too to see the pamphlet. I'm really looking forward to seeing that published by Ignition Press later on this year. It's wonderful hearing Kostya read, because I can remember reading some of his poems a couple of years ago for primers, and also in Under the Radar. And it's really wonderful then when you see things like pamphlets coming forward as well. It's very exciting. And congratulations on such a beautiful reading as well. It was just wonderful to hear those beautiful poems. Thank you. Another poet who I have admired over many years and whose work always moves me is Mona Arshi. Her collection, Small Hands, won the Ford Prize for the best first collection in 2015. To tell you a little bit more about Mona, she was born in West London to Punjabi parents and worked as a human rights lawyer at Liberty before she started writing poetry. Her second collection, Dear Big Gods, was published in April 2019, both of her books published by Liverpool University Press Pavilion Poetry List. Her poems and interviews have been published in The Times, The Guardian, Granta, and The Times of India, as well as on the London Underground. Her debut novel is due to be published in 2021, and she has recently been appointed the Honorary Professor at the University of Liverpool. It's my absolute delight to welcome our next special guest reader this evening. Will you please welcome Mona Arshi? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jane, for that lovely introduction. And Kostya, those poems are so beautiful. I remember a couple of them from our reading that wonderful reading we did in Norwich, I think this time last year. And I also just want to say something else, Jane. I just want to congratulate you for developing and growing such a wonderful list. It's so vital and important. So it's so brilliant. I just wanted to say that. And Maria, I mean, I can't wait to hear you read. It's a real pleasure to be reading here today alongside you. And I'm going to read a couple of poems from my collection, Dear Big Gods. And I was thinking about your title of your book. And so my theme of the reading is a little bit about the afterlife. And I thought I would give you initially, I would sort of anoint your book with a couple of prayers because my book has got 2 prayers in it. So I'm going to read those for you to anoint your book. And I love prayer, and there's something about prayer and poetry that is so closely aligned. You know, they're almost like cousins, really. And so and we need prayers at the moment. So this is Dear Big Gods. All you have to do is show yourself. In case you hear us, we are so small and fenceless in the shade. Throw us a hook when you can. Touch the scribbled child in the inferno. All you have to do is show yourself a little. Pin your dark olive green parts against the boulder. One more little prayer. Little prayer. It's me again. This time I'm a wren. Last time I was the first white sap. Don't blow away the fruit flies, but visit my pockets of blue-black pain. Little prayer, I am still here, hunkered down with the worm casts, blind song, shrinking in my scratchy after feathers. And I'm going to read a poem which is a bit slanty. There was a report last year of some women in Mexico tying themselves to trees, and they were wearing, they were dressed as brides, and actually it was an eco-protest. And I was sort of trying to write around some of the poems, some issues around ecology, and so this was perfect fuel. In Mexico, the women are marrying trees. Last night, I went all the way with a tree. I headed to the forest, past the lake, the thicket of wild junipers, blossoms still young and mute, the insensible fungi on the floor of the vast forest of leaves. The others came, slipped in like silent emissaries towards the dark colossal frame, the waiting grooms. So many trees, we sighed, so much loneliness. In the golden hour, we parted the bark and married them. If you press your ear to its body, the oak, it doesn't sing, it rings. You follow the sound deep inside. The speech is always fettered to the root. We raved all night, our impatient husbands still ringing out their oaths. And I'm going to give you a guzzle now. And this is about my daughters. Don't tell them because I'm not allowed to write poems about them, but I sort of snuck this in. They are very reluctant muses. So the refrain word is darkness. Guzzle, darkness. Around the base of the trees, amongst the broad oaks, I leave my daughters to ripen in the darkness. Beneath the cunning soil's breath, sweet white snowdrops, their strewn hearts are glowing in the darkness. The soil thanks us. We roll up our cuffs, fill our pocket mouths, defenseless in the darkness. A gentle murmured refrain like old rain. Snowflakes again, we answer to the darkness. I've seen those girls foraging for wild mushrooms, the rim around their retinas turning in the darkness. We plant cloves, tiny armless gods into the loam, poke them deeper into the uncertainty of darkness. My girls are distracted and starved of light, which is normal, which is essence of girl darkness. I slip outside and light a candle, cauterize a bud. Shabash I call to my girls, my praise in the darkness. And one more sort of slant poem I'll read from the collection is Delivery Room. Again, this is about my twins being born. Delivery room. Having you nearly killed me. The problem with active veins is that I bruise like a peach. My room is shaking. I croak out some intensifiers. Very, absolutely, utterly, totally, like I am ready to push now. The doctor asks, do you prefer the geometric or lyrical approach? I'm open to ideas. Neither, I say. His paisley tie swings like a pendulum over my belly. When pain strikes, it is lilac against the colour of the walls, which are the colour of Nice biscuits. In the milk of my mind, I draw a diagonal line and a perfect horizon. Have you ever ridden a penny farthing? Is that important? Will I still get the morphine? You are presenting very, very posterior. I hear the rest of his team concur. One of them doses out the syringe. The other one is crushing sugared almonds in her teeth. That's my morphine poem. I'll read one last poem, and again, congratulations, Maria. I can't wait to hear your reading. And I read a poem which is fairly new, and it's called Yellows. And I can't swim, and a couple of years ago I almost drowned, and so the poem is about this I guess this feeling of when you might see your soul, and so it sort of orbits around this idea of what a soul might be, and then so that conversation brings you back to Maria's wonderful book. So this is Yellows. Last summer was the first time I caught a glimpse of my soul. A daughter had saved me from drowning in a yellow-tiled pool. On the water's surface, a pair of nascent antlers were melting away in the sunlight. I am small, I say, shivering in my towel, bare and humble in my child's arms, my eyes fixed poolside. The second time was on a train, the rapeseed stinging my eyes, that blizzard of yellow. She was resting in the corner of the window, hitched on a bee, dust bathing in pollen. Too soon, not yet, I whispered to the tiny thing, and coward that I am, flipped them both out of the window. Then, on the longest day, a boy was falling. He fell into Richmond, this stowaway, fell into Surrey, and I saw the soul of this boy, the structure, its plumage, parachute out of the plane, dressed in all its paraphernalia. Now I am more circumspect. I rescue petals from teacups, appease wasps at my table, praying they've all repaired themselves fully in the ancient ways, in their yellow frocks, in those scented fields. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona. What a beautiful reading. Those poems are so astonishing and precise and beautiful. I've really enjoyed hearing you read them. Thank you. And thank you for being here to welcome Maria's book into the world with us. It's been lovely having such wonderful guest readers. So thank you to both of you and to Kostya this evening. Our final reader for this evening is Maria Taylor, and I'm absolutely delighted to be presenting her collection, Dressing for the Afterlife, her second book with Nine Arches Press. As Maria mentioned earlier, it's been quite a time since her first collection, which was 2012. So we're absolutely delighted. It's always a real pleasure as a publisher to continue to work with your writers over a period of years. And as some of you know, Maria is also reviews editor at Under the Radar. So it's wonderful to have that continued relationship with our writers, to see their work as it grows and develops. And we're so excited to see Dressing for the Afterlife here, and absolutely thrilled to be welcoming it this September to our list, and to be welcoming Maria back with her new poems. To tell you a little bit about the book, and then to tell you a little bit about Maria. What I really love about these poems is I think they have such enormous heart and great energy. They are glamorous, funny and effervescent. Maria Taylor's poems are sparkling as a fresh gin martini. And these poems are also threaded through with the monochrome desires of silver-screened starlets, contrasted against the realities of modern motherhood, and exploring too heritage and what that means in terms of place, in terms of history, in terms of the self. And these are also bold, beautiful poems that take up the joy of finding yourself afresh, of aging but being okay with it, of literally taking flight and discovering yourself as the woman who takes up running and finds her own wings and takes flight. To tell you a little bit about Maria. Maria Taylor is a British Cypriot poet, critic and reviewer who's been published in the Rialto, Magma and the TLS, among other publications. Her debut collection of poetry, Melancholy, was shortlisted for the Michael Murphy Memorial Prize, and her poetry featured in the Penguin anthology, The Poetry of Sex, edited by Sophie Hannah. She has a pamphlet, Instructions for Making Me, and is also the creator of Poetry Bingo, a quirky set of cards that are part game, part concrete poem, and are both from happenstance like her pamphlet. She's also a keen runner and walker, and she lives in Leicestershire. John McCullough says of Maria Taylor's new collection that it's exhilaratingly bold, and that these imaginative poems strike at the edges of form and emotional experience to uncover glittering seams. What a wonderful introduction to our next poet and our final reader for this evening. There will be a chance to ask questions at the end, so do pop them in the live chat. But for now, please welcome Maria Taylor.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me, especially to people who may not normally come to poetry readings who know me. I'm so privileged everyone is here. Thank you so much, Kostya and Mona, and massive thanks to Nine Arches Press. It has been amazing, and I am utterly grateful to you all. I'm going to, can you still see me okay? Just put you on minimize. Yeah, I'm going to start off by reading the prologue, which is trying to explain what the title's about. It's not necessarily about dying or the next life. It's more about when you're still alive and you have to live again. Prologue. To dress for the afterlife, step into the precise moment you ended a former existence and zipped yourself into the unknown. Choose a wedding outfit, a pair of overalls, an invisibility cloak, or the national dress of a country you have never visited before. This is how you must learn to breathe again. Now, the 2020 has been an interesting year, right? This was the last poem I wrote for the collection, which is, funnily enough, the first poem in the book. So if you're fed up with 2020, which I suspect a lot of us are, just imagine it's the 1920s and we're all silent film stars. And my cat has just entered the room. I began the 2020s as a silent film goddess. On the 1st of January, I threw away my smartphone and wrote a letter to my beau in swirling ink. I bobbed my hair, wore a cloche hat and shimmied right into town for juleps. I became Clara, I became Louise. When I became a vamp, the boys fell dead at my feet. I threw petals over their heads. I dined on prosperity sandwiches and sidecars, leaving restaurants with a sugar-rimmed mouth. In summer, I was a night blooming flower. By autumn, I was a hangover. Winter made me a Wall Street crash. Talking pictures were my ruin. At last I had a voice, but no one wanted to hear. Forgotten sisters, oh Vilma, oh Norma, oh May, a musty headdress of peacock feathers, defiant silence. So when I go running, I have lots of different thoughts in my head. So this is a poem about running and what's going on in your head, and it gets a bit surreal. She ran. I took up running when I turned 40. I opened my front door and started running down a filthy jetty and past my parents' flat. I ran through every town in which I'd ever lived. I ran past all my exes, even the few crushes who sipped mochas and wore dark glasses. I ran in a wedding dress through scattered confetti and was cheered by the cast of Star Wars. I ran through the screaming wind, rain and cloud. I ran through my mother's village and flew past armed soldiers at the checkpoint. I ran past my grandparents and Bacchus's mangy goats with their mad eyes and scaled yellow teeth. I ran straight through Oxford and Cambridge, didn't stop. I saw a naked man in Piccadilly Gardens. I ran through high school and behind the gym where gothy teens smoked and necked each other. I passed an anxious mother pushing a pram and a baby that kept throwing out her doll. Seasons changed. Summer turned into autumn. I couldn't get as far as I wanted. The lights changed. My ribs, my flaming heart, and my tired, tired body burned. I think she needs a good rest there. Now, this one comes with a little story. Virginia Woolf, you all know, had a half-sister called Laura Stephen, and she was greatly disapproved of by her new family, Virginia Woolf's family. She probably had what we would now call autism, and she was actually put in a mental asylum when she was a teenager, and she was there until the 40s when she died in her 60s. Meanwhile, Virginia Woolf goes on to be famous literary legend, and she kills herself by putting stones in her pockets and walking out into the River Ouse. So the two women have parallel lives. And I was just imagining what Laura might want to say to Virginia, the floating woman. Sister, since I stopped living for you, I've heard of your passing. You filled your pockets with stones and returned to water. I am much improved. I don't spit or throw scissors into the fire. I don't stammer as I no longer speak, but I sing, sister. When nurses bathe me, they pour rivers over my head. I think of you, how every word turned into water. You wrote we were 8, though you never named me. I am absent in our family portraits, but I am here. Your lost footsteps echo. I do not have a room but corridors. Walk here, sister. I will startle you. with my linen wings. 2 film poems, Joan Crawford, and then we lower the tone a bit with Daniel Craig. But I was imagining a woman who, a bit like Joan Crawford, as a mature actress who is no longer getting those phone calls and no longer getting those parts, and what she might be thinking of. And there she was in the shrunken apartment like Joan Crawford, toy dog on her lap. But there's armour in glamour, a mirror's feisty glare of brow and lips, a shield of heavy floral scent, ardour in her gestures, waiting for the non-existent call and stylish torpor on a sterile afternoon. Amen to the small bronze men with 24-carat souls. They prop open doors where joy might cat sneak in. The 20th century invented the microwave for your solitary meals. Hide Russian water in your flask. Hear new and improved women read scripts meant for you. A memory of fat cigar-smelling fingers, brown trails on your porcelain neck. Ghost of stick with me, kid, I'll get you in the movies. Should it ring, let the phone ring. Let it ring. Shut the bedroom door. We'll meditate on diamonds, our best friends. Wear an expensive yoke from Tiffany's. Remember May's words? Hey Beulah, peel me a grape. There isn't any man in the world worth getting lines over. A teardrop pendant sliding over heart or breast, depending on the beholder's eye. I'm going to lower the tone now. Daniel Craig. If you know this poem, you'll know what's coming next. If you don't, just go with me, forgive me. Hypothetical. A friend of mine asks if I'd sleep with Daniel Craig. Before I have time to answer, I'm in bed with Daniel Craig. He's stirring out of sleep, smelling of tobacco vanille. He flatters my performance, asks if I'd like coffee. Hang on, I say, I did not sleep with you, Daniel Craig. This is just a conversational frolic. My friend stands in the corner of my bedroom. You've gone too far, she says. I'm pulling the duvet away from his Hollywood body at exactly the moment my husband enters the room. I say, yes, this is exactly what it looks like, darling, but it's hypothetical, a mere conversational frolic. He's threatening me. There are lawyers in the room. My children begin to cry. I don't even like Daniel Craig. It's too late. The sheets are full of secreted evidence. There are forensics in the room, covering my body in blue powder, checking my skin for fingerprints. They match Daniel Craig's. He doesn't even know he slept with me. My marriage is a dead goal. My neighbours come into the room shaking heads. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. My husband has drawn lists of all the things he wants to keep: a plasma screen, an Xbox, a collection of muesli-coloured pebbles from our holidays in Truro. When you loved me, he snaps. My children will see a therapist after school. Daniel Craig is naked in a hypothetical sense, telling me we can make this work. My friend smirks behind a celebrity magazine featuring lurid details of our affair. There are photos. We are on a beach in the Dominican Republic, healthy and tanned, both kicking sand at a playful Joan Collins. I don't even like Daniel Craig. I tell the feeling. So then I reconsidered prayer, right? Because after that, where are you going to go? So I was thinking about what Kostya said about Greekness and how I think so many people from so many different cultures feel they have to behave a certain way. And then you get to the stage where you think, how do I reconcile this? So then I reconsidered prayer. It was unlike me. Light years since my Gyria laison, or the cross performed with 3 digits over skull, stomach and shoulders. In summer, I went back to the chapel in my father's austere village, thinking it was ironic that St. Minas resembled Frank O'Hara so perfectly. I lit Frank a candle and prayed at an altar of 2-headed golden eagles, to Our Lady of Infinite Hangovers, to the patron saint of citalopram, and the Holy Trinity of vodka, aging and insomnia. When the young priest entered, he was so kind that I almost thought it was okay to be me. If I kept quiet, I could be part of the stone. Once a drunk in a dingy Soho pub mistook the moon I keep on a silver chain around my neck for St. Christopher. I told God about it. I lit another flame. for those who journey alone, for the penitent and for the lost. And I should say that in my father's village, there really is a icon in the church where the saint looks exactly like the gay, urbane poet Frank O'Hara. And one day I will show you a photo. The next poem is called The Pavilion. Now, when I was little, we used to go to Upton Park in West London, and my parents would just like, you know, just walk me around like you do when you're a kid. And we'd sit and we'd watch the people playing bowls at the sports pavilion, and they'd tell me about their lives and just that kind of unfolding of life at those moments. I found out so many things, but one of the things I found out when I was young was that my grandpa died when my mother was 9. He was 47 and about 52. At that point, the British were in charge of Cyprus, and I was thinking that flag that was flying in the pavilion in my childhood is a kind of link to him in some kind of weird way. The pavilion. Under the pavilion's eaves, the year 1930 is carved. They took pride in things when we had an empire, one man's keen to tell me. Not that he would remember, the empire has fallen like rotten teeth. In that year, Bapu would have been 25 with less than twice that to live. How neat this building is, how it reminds us of order and symmetry. Bapu would have known the same flag. Men dressed in shrill whites played bowls. One bowl bumps politely into another, a soft ceramic chink as if to say, excuse me. Its manners are rewarded with a round of applause. When Bapu died, he was 47. No photographs, no letters. He was handed down to me like a fairy tale, with no happy ending for his widow. He'd had a stroke. The village had no doctors. Yaya rounded up chaos like a sheepdog and raised 6 children. No time for pride. Tea time. The players head into the pavilion. I stay outside. So, 2 poems about motherhood. This is the slightly surreal, crazy one. I was thinking about those books which tell you how to be the ideal mother or father or parent, and you should do lots of reward charts for your kids and all that. So I was imagining the voice of the mother who thinks she's perfect that you would find in those books. And yes, it was a lot of fun to poke fun at her. Poem in which I lick motherhood. I had several children, all perfect, with tongues made of soap and PVA glue running through their veins. My boys and girls benefit from eating the rainbow. I iron children twice daily. Creases are the devil's hoofprint. I am constructed from sticky back tape, pipe cleaners and clothes pegs. There are instructions for making me. Look at the appropriate shelves in reputable stores. I am fascinated by bunk beds, head lice and cupcakes. You will only leave the table when I have given you clear instructions. So far, I have not. The school run is my red carpet. Yes, you're right. How do I manage it? Though I didn't ask you. Dreaming is permitted from 7:40 to 8:20 a.m. on Saturdays and bank holidays. My children's reward charts are full of glittery stars. I am the Milky Way. Crying is dirty. 1 house point, 2 if you eat up all your peas. I always go off half an hour before my alarm. In the morning, I speak a language of bleeps and bell tones. Chew with your mouth closed. No, don't chew at all. Admire the presentation. Underneath my ribs is a complex weather system of sunshine and showers. Heat rises from me and blows across the Gulf Stream of my carefully controlled temper. Sometimes I am missed. Now this is the reality. Okay, so you have those moments where your kids get to a certain age and you forget what it was like when they were babies, and then someone's tiny little baby starts crying, and that kind of newborn cry is so different to any other thing that you can hear. So this is called What It Was Like. When a stranger's baby cries, my body remembers the shrill, tuneless song of need. It remembers endless nights of cat and dog rain. It remembers our road falling asleep as we forgot to remember us. That summer, clothes stopped remembering to fit. We'd look through thin curtains and remember the sun mimicked by sodium light. I remember the feel of warm, sleep-suited limbs still breathe in their powdery smell. The stranger I used to be lives in the present tense now. The baby fidgets on her chest like a rabbit, then he's calm. His blue eyes gnaw on me for a moment till his head's at rest. The frail, dreaming head of infancy that only knows a need for love and milk, that won't remember any of this. Just a few more now. So this is the poem that was in the Forward Prize Book of Poetry. And I wrote it and I was amazed that it was picked. It was one that I just wrote and it's in the book. I don't remember sending it out anywhere. And it's about time travel moving like this, like a figure of eight. There's a theory, that's what it does. And it's about just how we make the same mistakes and we keep going like that. Loop. Maybe time moves like a figure of eight, surging forwards then back on itself. Light returns from exploded stars. A grown woman could turn a corner and see herself crying as a girl. Newsflash, our world ends again. The disappearing forests of childhood disappear again. The path curves. It takes the woman back to a dimly lit bar where she meets the same lover over and over again. She risks everything once more. They've already met before they said a word. This is about good old Greek dancing. I used to get taken to Greek dancing every Saturday and I was rubbish at it. So this is a poem just to commemorate that. This is my second to last poem, you'd probably like to know. So this poem is also one going into a podcast by a group called Alternative Realities and Fictions tomorrow. So I'm really pleased with that. And it's called Learning the Steps. Every Saturday, our dance teacher looks up to God in the light bulbs and silently prays our trainers will turn into red shoes. Amen. We're not ballerinas. We're looping in circles and getting nowhere, mostly anti-clockwise, making vines out of arms and legs. We dance to learn about a part of ourselves books can't teach. It's what our parents expect. If we hop on a wrong note, a bear will eat us. We're learning the steps of old island lives, Hasabigo, Galamatiano, Sirto, a dragging dance where you're carried along by the wrists. We leap like salmon trying to catch scent of home as music pours through the speakers like flood and our bodies vibrate with the boom. Still, there we go again, tripping up, making shoddy X's with feet that want to place themselves on an invisible map. And finally, and thank you so much, everybody. I go running a lot, and there may be a lot of people watching this who I go running with. Hi, this is for you. This is called Woman Running Alone. And thank you so much, everybody. And here we go. Woman Running Alone. A woman who follows her own trail and pounds pavements of unending cities, past statues of forgotten men, fountains, sticky sunshine pouring over tower blocks, past gentrified basement windows where wives hear the washing up howl between their hands, past suits on phones and panda-eyed women in doorways with faces that say, I know, tell me about it. These streets where open hands beg for more than is ever offered, where someone's kid is a sleeping bag, where the wolf whistle becomes the wolf and love's worn like musk aftershave, where she forgets who she is, Miss Keep On, Miss Never Going Home, neither running away nor running toward anyone, wind-sifted, letting the weather sing through her, she who is different to her brothers. The rhythm fills her with flight, and her wings, what wings she has. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was such a wonderful, wonderful reading and such a great way to welcome Dressing for the Afterlife into our hearts and onto our shelves. Congratulations on publication day of your new book. I'm going to invite all of our readers to join us now for a Q&A session. And I hope it's okay if I might ask you a couple of questions first as well to kick us off while our audience have a little bit of time to think of any questions they might have. So first of all, I wondered a question for all of you really, in terms of how you write and the subjects you write on, it strikes me that what you have in common is that you all explore quite intimately the way in which language and place and memory allow us to explore family stories and our own stories, our heritage, our place, our sort of, in terms of our language and our sort of memories of things, whether that's memories of loss or memories of a discovering of ourselves, or in the case of some Maria's poems, memories of her grandparents that have become part of her poems too. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit each really about how poetry has become a space for exploring those quite personal stories, and if there are challenges around that too for you in terms of bringing so much of that in terms of language and place and memory into your work.
Yeah, so I kind of wrote that Pavilion poem about my grandpa because he was so mysterious, and it's probably the only tangible thing I'll have of him. The only other tangible thing I'll have of him is that I did see where he was buried in Northern Cyprus. But if you know about Northern Cyprus, you know how difficult that is. I mean, that border was only opened up less than 20 years ago. And I just found his gravestone sort of just thrown somewhere over the graveyard wall. And I was just, I don't know, I think these things are in us and we need to explore them. And we find our own kind of truth, and we get to kind of know people and things that have gone before, even if we don't really normally in real life. So yeah, poetry is good for that. It's good for finding a space, making your own little world on the page, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe I should. Yeah, that's such a complex question. I'm an only child, and I've been away from home for a very long time. And also, I have always been interested in history and my heritage, considering I'm not going to really I don't plan to have children, so I don't really have anybody to pass the stories that have been passed down from my family to me. And for me, it's just a way of expressing myself and putting myself and my heritage on the page to kind of maybe also confront any low self-confidence I may have, to sort of tell myself that I have a story to tell and I want to say it. I want to share it with people. But ultimately, I think it's also because a way for me to deal with nostalgia and the fact that I don't fully belong in either England or Greece. So I'm sort of confronting that on the page. And at the same time, my dad talking to me about his family is the one way we do talk. He doesn't express his emotions very often. He does on the page, oddly enough, when he writes to me. And that's, I guess, the page in poetry is just one way of bringing all this together in one form of expression and commemoration and narrative, I guess. Yeah.
So I guess that's really good question, I think. And I think as poets, we probably think about that more than anything else. I wonder if actually poets are, what we're doing is we're sort of lost makers. That's what we do. And so we are constantly standing under lintels, and we're looking forward and we're looking back. And there's something about incubating something that comes to us, perhaps just floats into our minds, that we work on quite a lot. But I always think that I am my memory, I suppose, is a very small part of the story of the poem. Actually, I'm transforming it into something else. I suppose that's what I hope the destination of the poem is bigger than this my little thing I have. But I do like this idea of looking back and constantly looking back, which is what we do, especially when you reach a certain age, when you've accumulated so much. And of course, memory constantly informs us and informs our future. So Yeah, I never sort of think about it, but it's a really good question to sort of ask, I guess, you know, what when we're making poems that are personal.
Thank you very much. I think they're all such really interesting answers, and it's almost one of those questions you could talk about for in so much detail for so much longer. It's just wonderful to hear how you all explore that within your own work. And I love that idea of loss. Was it loss making you said, Mona, about the poets as loss makers? I think that's such an incredible phrase. Yeah, thank you. And I've got a question actually for Maria and Mona. We've got a couple of questions coming through as well, so I'll move on to those in just a second. But one question for you both, because you've both now published second collections. What was the distinction, what was the difference in that experience for you in writing it? What were the challenges? What were the discoveries? What were the directions you took?
Oh, that's hard. It's hard because I'm not someone who has a plan. I think you have ideas, and it's not like when you write a novel and you've got a sort of idea of where you might go. I have no idea where I'm going to go. And then it took you, Jane, to say, this is what's kind of bringing all these poems together, because I just thought they were all completely separate, like they were a little naughty motley crew of poems. And sometimes it takes someone else to say, hang on, this is maybe what you're trying to do. And I really appreciated that. So yeah, you just kind of, I don't know, it's just something I do, and I just keep writing these individual poems and not realizing that sometimes there is something going on there. And yeah, so I'm very glad I've got to book 2, and let's hope there's going to be a book 3 as well. And yeah, but yeah, I'm really pleased that I've got this far.
So it's interesting, Maria, because I think there was an 8-year gap between your first book and your second book, and I actually published my second book, I think, quite quickly after my first book. So it was 4 years, which I think is quite quick. And actually, it was very interesting about needing, and I think you really need an editor to sort of tell you where the blind spots are, and also another set of eyes that can tell you what sort of shape it and what some of the themes are. And I started writing the second book, and I started just collecting poems and sort of putting them to one side, thinking that there was no relationship really between the poems. But what I started realizing was that the poems started talking to each other. They started having a conversation. There was something going on when I wasn't around, actually, because when I looked at them, I couldn't. And then when I attended to the poems, and I had about 25, I realized, oh, this is something, there is something going on there. And I recognized that. I think your instinct kind of kicks in. And then I realized actually I was writing a sister book, a kind of sibling to Small Hands. So Dear Big Gods is such a big relationship to the first book, and actually the first book's quite a sad book. It's about a lot of elegies, you know, about my brother's passing, and I didn't really want to write another book like that, but obviously the poems needed to be written, and I needed to still attend to that loss making, I guess. And so I realized pretty soon that I had to do that in the second book, that I had a sort of responsibility to attend to that in the book. But it took a long time. There was a time, I think all poets have, where they just are sort of at sea. And I don't know if you experience this, Maria, but you know, you're sort of at sea, and then something happens, and then you have moments of clarity, and you understand what you have actually in front of you.
Thank you, Mona. And Kostya, does this sound at all familiar in terms of bringing together your pamphlet? Are there echoes of that experience, of that instinct, of that sort of sense of finding something and things kind of coalescing around it that you're finding?
I would say so. I came back to poetry quite late. I first started writing when I was about 22 in Warwick. But then I didn't really want to, I don't know, I wasn't really drawn to poetry at the time, even though I was reading it. I was reading a lot of poetry, but I just wanted to write a novel, you know, make a big name in fiction and get published, make lots of money, you know. And then when I was, yeah, no luck with that. But then at 35, around that age, I started going back to poetry, a few things that sort of drew me back to it. Initially, I thought I was going to write lots of boy poems, you know, about being in London, going out, sex, you know, that kind of stuff. And I thought that was going to be the main thing I was going to write about and I would have in a book. But it turns out it wasn't. Somehow I realized I was writing quite a lot of books about, poems about my relationship with my parents. And then slowly, I sort of worked through my poems. I realized I had about 35 poems that kind of worked together, and then I sort of went back to them and I figured out which ones work well as a pamphlet. Interestingly enough, the competition that I won last year, the Oxford Brookes one, because it was the poem that won was a poem about my parents, that sort of made me realize maybe those are the poems I need to sort of put together, my relationship with them. So it became a very intimate look at my relationship with my parents and the impact of my being gay and coming out and my leaving Greece had on them. So I had a pamphlet before that, which was a bit more towards, you know, my life in England. And I thought, actually, I need to pay attention to these poems about my parents. And I feel like they sort of got together on their own without me trying very hard somehow. And that's how that pamphlet came out. And in the end, the very last thing I had to decide was the pamphlet's name, which is Ephebos, which means teenager in modern Greek. It's got some classical connotations as well about a young male adult of military age, that kind of thing. But I thought maybe that was the right one because these poems belong to that era between, you know, me being a teenager and a young adult, and my relationship with my parents. And I'm so glad that it took a while for me to actually find a home for the pamphlet, because this is the pamphlet I think I was meant to put together and end up publishing in a couple of months. So I'm very pleased it happened this way.
Thank you, Kostya. We have a question now a couple of questions from our audience. The first one is from Kathy Bell. And she asks, I'd like to hear the poets talk about ways in which having access to a language that isn't English affects or enriches their poetry in English through meanings, rhythms, cadences, etc.
That's interesting. When I was a kid, when I used to do all that Greek dancing, we also had to do these little shows, and they were usually very nationalistic and very Greek and, you know, very like, you know, you were born here, but you're on the stage. And we used to recite a lot of poetry. It wasn't always the best poetry, but my experience of poetry comes from Greek culture, not from English poetry. Because when I was young, I had to stand up on the stage, weirdly enough, and do these poems like da 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 da, and be very nervous. And I think some of those rhythms just got into me or something. So yeah, I think maybe not so much the language, more like sound and rhythm is a thing. I think Kostya will know, like some of those little verses.
Probably. No.
Yes,
really?
Exactly. These kind of things that we had to do. So yeah, sound. It kind of gets into you, all that rhythm, definitely.
For me, access to another language. I work in my head in two languages. They say that if you speak a second language, English is supposedly my second language. They say that really every time I speak English, it's an act of translation from Greek. I'm not really sure how that works, because I think I'm much more eloquent in English these days than I am in Greek, because I don't really talk Greek very much. I think maybe it's my father's voice maybe is one that influences me quite a lot. And maybe some early interests I had in sort of the classics, you know, if you like Homer, those poets. But reading modern Greek poetry in school, at least, it was the canon, you know, very male, heterosexual, middle class canon that we were being taught. And I really couldn't find a connection with these poems, even though they're great poets and much admired. It took until I found Cavafy, until I first read Cavafy, for me to realize there was somebody writing about homosexual desire. And that was the first time when I realized there was another person's voice from about 100 years ago that I could connect to. But again, even so, then I read modern Greek poetry and I find it very difficult to read it sometimes because I'm not as comfortable reading it as much. And it took until I discovered this poet who was completely out of print in Greece, Andreas Tsolakis. He was a gay man writing in the 70s, 80s, and then he died of AIDS in the early 1990s. And that was the very first time that I was reading Greek poetry that I felt I could recognize myself in. And that wasn't just in the topics he wrote about, it was also in the way he wrote, very straightforward, very raw language. And that was the very first time that I felt like I could see my language on the page, the Greek language. So that was a turning point for me. And I think reading him probably has kind of got into my own language a little bit as well. And he's probably my biggest Greek language influence recently.
So again, that's a really, really interesting question. And I love the responses because all three of us, I think, have another tongue. And I think that, again, this is something I think about quite a lot because my mother tongue is Punjabi. So English is an acquired language for me. And I think that makes, for me personally, quite a lot of difference when I construct language and poetry in particular. And I think it's the quality of the attention probably I give to the English that's interesting. I also think there's a sort of there's a sort of offness actually that you bring to poetry in particular when you have an acquired language, which I think is actually interesting to exploit. And Kostya, I think you sort of touched on that, but so I think it sort of, I import it into my work, I think almost into the soil of the work, and occasionally some of the actual literal Punjabi floats into the work. I mean, I think I used a word, shabash, which is a word, an Urdu word, in fact, which is in the ghazal. And the other way that I use, I think, Punjabi is I use some of the traditions of writing poetry, which are from my inheritance. So the ghazal, for example, is a form that I remember listening to when I was younger. I remember the men used to sit and read, and recite the ghazal, and the ghazals are basically music. And so that's really embedded. That's, I think, in my bloodstream. I can't shift that music, and it's a form I'm interested in writing in. So those are the ways. I actually feel that if you have a second or third language, I think that to use it is really interesting. I'm finding a lot of the contemporary poets I'm reading at the moment that kind of harness that, the energy of that work is some of the most exciting poetry around.
Thank you so much to all of you for such wonderful answers to that question. And it is, I think we're in a real age of hybridity in terms of the form of poetry and also in terms of language. There feels like there's so much more kind of space for languages, multiple languages to exist within poems. And that's a really exciting thing to be seeing, I think, in poetry right now. We've got time for one more question. So this one is for Maria, and it is from Alternative Stories podcast, and they ask, I love the way that time works in your poems. You seem so skilled in placing your poems in specific times and places. Is that something you work hard on, or does it come naturally?
Short answer, it just comes naturally. I just go with the memory or the moment, and suddenly I'm in it, or I try to be in it in the poem. It's not something that I actually spend a lot of time researching, because I think poetry is good like that. You know, you can kind of just go with the feeling and a memory, rather than, and go for something which is the kind of equivalent truth as well. So all those images that we all come out with as poets, you know, if it feels true, it probably is. So there you go.
I think that's probably a good note on which to draw this evening to a close. Thank you so much to our wonderful guest readers, Kostya Selakis, Mona Arshi, and our launching poet tonight, Maria Taylor, who publishes this book today, Dressing for the Afterlife, with Nine Arches Press. Just to say, in the chat, if you look in the live chat on YouTube, there are links to buy all of the books by all of tonight's poets, so please do explore those. Please support writers. It's an extraordinarily challenging time for lots of publishers, for bookshops, for people generally launching books at this time. They are up against so many challenges in terms of what's happening with stores being quiet, and the media and other things being under sort of quite a great deal more strain than normal in terms of publicity and space to talk about books and things. So every little bit of support you can give as a readership to these writers really matters. So my final thank you tonight is to our wonderful audience who have joined us, who have been in this lovely warm virtual room sharing in the poetry. It's been an absolute treat. May I also say a very big thank you to Angela Hicken, my marketing manager at Nine Arches Press, who's been helping tonight as well, look after YouTube and look after our live feed here as well. Thank you very much, Angela. So finally, Kostya, Maria, Mona, we're going to applaud, and then we're going to end the evening. So if you'd like to join with me in a round of applause, and then we shall leave the event. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.